I've been driving long-haul routes for 15 years, and I've seen plenty of weird stuff on the highways. But what happened on I-80 through Nebraska still keeps me up some nights wondering if I should have called someone, or if there was even anyone to call. It was a Tuesday in March around 2 a.m. I was hauling refrigerated goods from Denver to Chicago, making good time through the endless stretch of Nebraska farmland. The CB radio had been quiet for hours, just the occasional trucker checking in at truck stops or warning about speed traps. That's when I first heard him. Breaker 119, this is Nightcrawler looking for any eastbound company out here. The voice was growly, older, with that particular loneliness that comes from too many nights on the road. I picked up my handset. This is Big Rig Danny, eastbound at mile marker 184. Copy you, Nightcrawler. Well, hey there, Danny boy. Nice to have some company. What's your 20? I told him my location and cargo. Standard trucker small talk. He said he was hauling empty flatbed heading to pick up farm equipment in Iowa. Nothing unusual about that conversation except something in his voice seemed off, like he was trying too hard to sound normal. About 20 minutes later, I saw headlights in my mirror. A big rig was coming up fast, which wasn't unusual. Some drivers push harder than others, but instead of passing, the truck matched my speed and hung back about 100 yards. The headlights were those old-style sealed beams, not the modern LED arrays most of us run now. Hey, Nightcrawler, you behind me there? Static for a few seconds then. That's a negative, Danny boy. I'm still way back at marker 160. Why do you ask? I glanced at my GPS. I was at mile marker 197. The math didn't add up. If he was at 160 and I was at 197, that was nearly 40 miles between us. But someone was definitely tailing me. Just thought I saw you back there. Must be someone else. Well, now that's interesting. Haven't seen another truck in over an hour. You sure someone's back there? I looked in my mirror again. The headlights were still there, maintaining that exact distance. I tried the CB on channel 19, asking if anyone was behind a blue Peterbilt. That's what I drive. No response. Nightcrawler, you still copy? Oh, I copy real good, Danny boy. Tell me more about this mystery truck. Something about the way he said that made my skin crawl. There was an eagerness in his voice, like he was enjoying this more than he should. I decided to test something. I'm going to slow down, see if he passes. I eased off the throttle, dropping from 65 to 55. The headlights behind me slowed too, maintaining that same distance. No trucker does that. You either pass or you fall back. You don't just follow. Any luck with your shadow? Nightcrawler's voice crackled through the static. Still there. Still hanging back. You know, Danny boy. Sometimes the road plays tricks on you. Long nights, empty highways. Mind starts seeing things that might not be there. I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just tired, imagining patterns that weren't really there. But then I noticed something else. Every time I changed lanes, even slightly, the headlights behind me changed lanes too, matching my movements exactly. Nightcrawler, what's your truck look like? Oh, she's a beauty. Classic Kenworth W900. Long nose, white cab with blue stripes. Real vintage ride. Why do you ask? I squinted into my side mirror, trying to make out details of the truck behind me, but the headlights were too bright. All I could see was a dark silhouette. Just curious. Haven't seen many classic rigs lately. Well, I take real good care of her. Spent a lot of time making sure she runs quiet as a whisper. You'd be surprised how close you can get to someone without them noticing. My blood went cold. What did you say? I said she runs real smooth. Good for long hauls, you know. But that's not what I heard. I was certain he'd said something about getting close to someone. I glanced at my CB radio, wondering if static was distorting his voice, making me hear things wrong. Mile marker 2 on 10 flashed by. According to what Nightcrawler had said, he should still be miles behind me, but that truck in my mirror was getting closer now, maybe 50 yards back. I could make out more of its shape. Definitely an older model, probably from the 80s. Danny boy, you still with me? Yeah, I'm here. You know, I've been thinking about what you said about that truck following you. That's real interesting. In my experience, when someone's watching you that close, they're usually planning something. What do you mean? Oh, nothing specific, just that most folks, they mind their own business on the highway. But sometimes you get someone who takes a special interest. Could be they like your truck, your route, your schedule. The way he drew out that last word made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I looked at my fuel gauge. Still had enough to make it to the next major truck stop about 60 miles ahead. Maybe I should pull off, see what happened. You ever had someone follow you, Nightcrawler? A long pause. Too long. Can't say that I have, Danny boy, but I've done my share of observing. Amazing what you can learn about someone just by watching their habits when they stop for fuel, which rest areas they prefer, what time they usually shut down for the night. I felt sick. This conversation had taken a turn I didn't like at all. I reached for my cell phone, thinking I should call someone, but there was no signal out here, just endless dark farmland and that truck in my mirror. I think I'm going to take a break at the next exit, I said, testing. Exit 238. That's still a ways off. Nothing but that old abandoned rest stop at mile marker 225. Been closed for years now, real isolated spot. He was right about the abandoned rest stop. I'd passed it dozens of times. But how did he know exactly which exit I was thinking of? And why mention the abandoned stop? Mile marker 220 passed, but the headlights behind me were definitely closer now, maybe 30 yards. Close enough that they were starting to wash out my mirrors. I flicked the switch to dim them, but it didn't help much. You know what's funny, Danny boy? I've been on this route so many times. I know every mile of it, every rest stop, every truck stop, every little back road that leads to nowhere. Real easy to get turned around out here if you don't know where you're going. I know where I'm going. Oh, I'm sure you do. But sometimes plans change. Sometimes you find yourself taking a different path than you intended. The truck behind me flashed its brights once, twice. In trucker language, that usually means you want to pass. But there was plenty of room in the left lane. He flashed them again, longer this time. Nightcrawler, is that you behind me flashing your lights? Silence. Static hissed through the CB speaker. Nightcrawler, do you copy? Nothing. I tried channel 9, the emergency channel. Anyone out there? This is Big Rig Danny on eastbound I-80, mile marker 222. I've got a situation here. Static. The truck behind me was close enough now that I could see it wasn't just following, it was positioning itself. When I moved to the center of my lane, it moved too. When I drifted slightly right, it matched me perfectly. This wasn't coincidence or tired driving. This was deliberate. Mile marker 225. The abandoned rest stop appeared in my headlights, a dark cluster of buildings set back from the highway. The truck behind me slowed as we passed it like the driver was taking a long look. Then it sped up again, closing the distance to maybe 20 yards. My CB crackled to life. Danny boy, you still there? The voice was different now, closer, like he was whispering into the microphone. Where are you? I asked. Oh, I'm right where I need to be. Been following your route for a while now, learning your patterns. You're very predictable, Danny. Same stops, same schedule, same everything. How do you know my route? Wasn't hard to figure out. Amazing what you can learn from CB chatter, trucker forums, even those GPS tracking systems, if you know how to access them. Most drivers, they don't even realize how visible they are. The truck behind me flashed its brights again, and this time I noticed something in my peripheral vision. The right side of the highway where the service road paralleled the interstate. Another set of headlights facing us from about a quarter-mile out. Nightcrawler, you got a buddy with you. Laughter came through the static, not pleasant laughter. Might be. Might just be someone else who finds you interesting. You've got quite the reputation, Danny boy. Always helpful on the CB. Always willing to chat with strangers. Very trusting. I thought about all the conversations I'd had over the years, all the personal details I'd shared with other truckers, my routes, my schedule, where I lived, where I stopped, information that seemed harmless when you were just passing time on a lonely highway. The service road vehicle was getting closer, moving to intersect with the highway just ahead. I pressed the accelerator, but the truck behind me sped up too, staying right on my tail. In my mirror, I could see it clearly now. An old Kenworth white cab with blue stripes just like Nightcrawler had described. Mile marker 230, 5 men to the next exit. The vehicle on the service road was almost parallel with us now, and I could see it was another truck. They had me boxed in. "What do you want?" I asked into the CB. "Want? I don't want anything, Danny boy. This is just research, studying habits, routes, vulnerabilities. Amazing how easy it is to track someone across state lines when you know what you're doing." The exit sign for mile 235 appeared in my headlights. It was a small exit leading to a rural highway that disappeared into farmland. Not much traffic, not many witnesses. The truck behind me flashed its brights 3 times, and the truck on the service road responded with 3 flashes of its own. Some kind of signal. I grabbed my CB handset. "Listen, I don't know what kind of game this is, but I'm calling the state police as soon as I get signal. Go right ahead, Danny boy. Tell them about the scary truckers who drove near you on a public highway. I'm sure they'll be real interested." He was right. What could I report? That someone was driving behind me. That a voice on the CB was making me uncomfortable. I hadn't been threatened, hadn't been touched, hadn't been harmed in any way. But I knew something was wrong. Every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of driving was screaming at me. The exit was coming up fast. Both trucks were still with me, one behind, one on the service road moving to block the on-ramp. At the last second, I yanked the wheel right and took the exit, engine braking hard as I curved down the ramp. The truck behind me didn't follow. It continued straight on the interstate, disappearing into the distance. The truck from the service road was nowhere to be seen. I sat at the stop sign at the bottom of the ramp, hands shaking, staring at the empty rural highway stretching away into darkness. My CB was silent. After a few minutes, I keyed the mic. "Nightcrawler, you copy?" Nothing. I tried again. "This is Big Rig Danny. Anyone out there?" A different voice answered, southern accent, friendly tone, Big Rig. "Danny, this is Cotton picking up the back door. You all right? Sound a little shook up." "Yeah, I'm fine. Hey, you've been monitoring Channel 19? Heard anyone calling himself Nightcrawler?" "Negative, Danny. Been quiet as a church on this frequency for the last hour. You sure you're okay?" I looked at my GPS. The rural highway would eventually loop back to the interstate about 20 miles ahead. I could rejoin my route there, maybe catch up to my original schedule. But as I drove through the empty farmland, I kept checking my mirrors. And about 10 miles down that dark country road, I saw headlights appear behind me again. Old style sealed, beams maintaining that same careful distance. I never did figure out if those trucks were really following me or if the whole thing was just an elaborate coincidence mixed with road fatigue and an overactive imagination. But I changed my route after that night. Started using different highways, different stops, different schedules. The thing that bothers me most isn't what might have happened if I'd stayed on the interstate. It's something I noticed later when I was looking at my logbook. The conversation with Nightcrawler lasted over an hour, and in that time, I'd covered 43 mi. But according to what he'd told me about his location, he should have been getting farther away from me the whole time. Unless he was never behind me at all, unless he was ahead of me waiting. I should have trusted my gut when I pulled into that truck stop outside Bakersfield. It looked normal enough from the highway. Big signs advertising diesel and food. Plenty of parking for rigs, the usual setup. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my cab. It was 3 a.m. on a Thursday in October. I was running a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Portland, trying to make up time after getting stuck in traffic earlier. My fuel gauge was pushing empty. and this was the only stop for 30 menors in either direction. Not much choice. The parking lot was nearly full, which struck me as odd. Most truck stops this size don't pack out during the week, especially not this late. But there they were, dozens of big rigs lined up in neat rows, most with their running lights off, drivers presumably sleeping. I found a spot near the back and started fueling up. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. Despite all those trucks, the main building was almost empty. Just a tired-looking clerk behind bulletproof glass and one customer buying energy drinks. No drivers eating in the restaurant, nobody browsing the truck accessories, nobody using the showers. For a truck stop this busy, it was like a ghost town inside. The fuel pump was running slow, so I had time to look around. The trucks in the lot were mostly older models, nothing too unusual about that. But what caught my attention was how uniform they looked. All clean, all well-maintained, all with similar modifications. Custom exhaust stacks, upgraded lighting, aftermarket bumpers like they belonged to some kind of fleet, but with no company logos anywhere. A guy walked past my truck while I was topping off. Middle-aged, wearing clean jeans and a flannel shirt. The kind of casual clothes you'd expect from a driver. But he wasn't walking toward any of the parked trucks. He was walking between them, looking into cabs, checking license plates. When he noticed me watching, he smiled and waved, then disappeared between two trailers. I finished fueling and went inside to pay. The clerk was friendly enough, but when I mentioned how busy the parking lot was, he just shrugged. "Always gets crowded this time of night," he said, not looking up from his magazine. "Must be good for business. Sure is you staying the night?" Something about the way he asked made me uncomfortable, like he was hoping for a specific answer. "No, just passing through. Long way to Portland." He looked up then, studying my face for a second longer than necessary. Portland's a long haul. Lot of mountain roads between here and there. Easy to get turned around if you don't know the route. I'd been driving to Portland for 8 years. Knew the route like the back of my hand, but I just nodded and headed for the door. Walking back to my truck, I noticed more people moving through the parking lot. Not toward the building, not toward their own rigs, just walking, patrolling almost. A woman in a baseball cap circling the perimeter. A man with a clipboard writing down license plate numbers. Another guy sitting in a pickup truck with the engine running, watching the highway. I climbed into my cab and started the engine, eager to get back on the road. But as I put it in gear, someone knocked on my driver's side door. It was the guy in flannel who'd been walking between trucks earlier. "Hey there," he called through the glass. "You mind rolling down your window for a second?" Every instinct told me not to, but I cracked it an inch. "What's up?" "I noticed your load securement back there. Looks like one of your straps might be loose. Just thought you'd want to know before you hit the road. I'd checked my straps an hour ago. They were fine." But he was walking toward the back of my trailer. So I shut off the engine and followed him. Better safe than sorry. He led me around to the rear of the trailer, pointing up at the straps holding down my cargo right there. "See? Looks a little slack." I looked where he was pointing. The straps were tight, exactly as they should be. When I turned to tell him so, he was standing closer than before, much closer. And I noticed he had a small radio clipped to his belt, the kind with an earpiece. "Straps look fine to me," I said, backing toward my cab. "You sure? Can't be too careful with electronics. Valuable cargo like that. A lot of people would be interested in knowing where it's headed." That stopped me cold. I hadn't told him what I was hauling. The trailer was sealed. No windows, no markings indicating the contents, but somehow he knew. "How do you know what's in my trailer?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Lucky guess. Most trucks heading north from LA are carrying something worth taking. Electronics, consumer goods, automotive parts, all valuable, all easy to move." I was backing toward my cab now, trying to keep distance between us. "I need to get going." Sure. Long way to Portland, but you know, Might want to consider taking a different route. I-5 can be dangerous at night. A lot of accidents, a lot of incidents, trucks going missing, drivers getting robbed. Safer to take the back roads. Maybe stop somewhere secure for the night. I'll stick to the interstate. Your call. But if you change your mind, there's a nice quiet spot about 40 miles north. Old truck stop, been closed for years, real private. Nobody bothers you there. I didn't answer. Just climbed back into my cab and locked the doors. Through my windshield, I could see him talking into his radio. Other people in the parking lot were looking in my direction now like they were waiting for some kind of signal. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking space. But before I could reach the exit, another truck moved to block the driveway. The driver got out and started checking his tires, taking his time. Behind me, I saw a flannel shirt guy walking back toward the building, still talking on his radio. I waited. After what felt like forever, the truck blocking the exit finished his tire check and moved out of the way. I pulled onto the highway, checking my mirrors constantly. No one followed immediately, but about 5 miles down the road, I saw headlights pull out from the truck stop. For the next hour, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Every truck that passed seemed to slow down slightly, drivers looking into my cab. Every vehicle behind me maintained just the right distance, close enough to keep visual contact, but far enough to avoid suspicion. At a red light in a small town, a car pulled up beside me. The passenger rolled down his window and called out, "Hey, you got a CB in that rig?" I nodded. "Might want to monitor channel 17. Some good information on there about road conditions ahead." The light turned green and he drove off. I switched my CB to channel 17 and listened. Voices discussing traffic, weather, fuel prices, normal trucker chatter. But then I started picking up fragments of something else. Blue Peterbilt northbound on 5. Confirmed the load. Electronics Portland delivery. Alternate route through the mountains, less traffic. They were talking about me, coordinating something. I switched off the CB and pressed harder on the accelerator. The highway stretched ahead, mostly empty, except for the occasional car or truck. But every time I looked in my mirrors, I saw the same headlights maintaining the same distance. When I changed lanes, they changed lanes. When I sped up, they sped up. I pulled off at the next exit, hoping to lose them, or at least force them to reveal themselves. It was a small town with just a gas station and a diner, both closed at this hour. I parked under a streetlight and waited. The headlights I'd been watching drove past the exit without slowing. But a minute later, a different vehicle pulled off the highway, then another. Soon there were 4 cars and a pickup truck parked at various spots around the small town, all with good views of my location. I started the engine and got back on the highway. The vehicles followed, maintaining their positions like some kind of escort formation. Not threatening exactly, but definitely coordinated. My GPS showed a rest area coming up in 12 ME. Public place, well lit, maybe even some other drivers around. I decided to stop there, maybe call someone, figure out what was happening. But when I reached the rest area, it was closed for construction. Barriers blocked the entrance and orange signs directed traffic to continue to the next rest stop 60 minutes away. The same 60 men of Mountain Highway the guy at the fuel stop had warned me about. I kept driving, but the vehicles following me were getting bolder now, closer, more obvious, like they didn't care if I knew they were there. 20 minutes into the mountains, I saw what I was dreading. Brake lights ahead, traffic slowing to a crawl, then stopping completely. Construction accident or something else. I couldn't tell. But I was boxed in. Steep mountainside on one side, guardrail, and a long drop on the other. The vehicles that had been following me pulled up closer, forming a loose circle around my truck. Doors started opening, people getting out, walking casually in my direction. That's when I noticed the CB radio crackling to life on channel 19. A woman's voice, calm and professional. "Driver of the blue Peterbilt, you need to stay calm and follow instructions. Exit your vehicle slowly and leave the keys in the ignition." I grabbed the handset. "Who is this?" What do you want? We just want to talk about your cargo, your route, your schedule, information. That's all. No one has to get hurt. Through my windshield, I could see them approaching. Maybe 8 people moving with purpose, but not rushing, like they'd done this before. I looked ahead at the traffic jam, behind at the people closing in, and made a decision. I dropped the truck into low gear and steered onto the narrow shoulder, scraping against the mountainside as I squeezed past the stopped traffic. My mirrors showed the people running back to their vehicles, but it would take them time to get turned around in the blocked traffic. I had maybe a 5-minute head start. I drove like that for 10 miles, partly on the shoulder, partly in the breakdown lane, until I reached a truck stop I recognized, one I'd used before with good security cameras and 24-hour staff. I pulled in and parked right in front of the main building under the brightest lights available. For the next hour, I sat in my cab with the doors locked, watching for any sign of the vehicles that had been following me. Nothing. Eventually, I went inside and asked the clerk if I could use their phone to call my dispatcher, explained that I'd be late due to some mechanical problems. I never saw those people again and nothing happened to my load. Delivered it to Portland the next day without incident. But I've thought about that night a lot. Wondered what would have happened if I'd stopped when they wanted me to. If I'd followed their instructions. The thing that bothers me most is something I figured out later when I was looking over my fuel receipts. That truck stop outside Bakersfield, the one with all the parked trucks and the strange people walking around. According to the receipt, I bought fuel there at 3:17 a.m. But according to my logbook, I didn't arrive in that area until 3:45 a.m. Either my watch was wrong or I bought fuel somewhere that doesn't exist on any map I can find. Music. I've always been particular about my routes. 22 years of driving cross-country, and I stick to the interstates, the well-traveled highways, the places where help is never too far away. But sometimes the load dictates the route. And that's how I ended up on Highway 50 through Nevada at 2 in the morning, hauling machine parts to a mining operation outside Ellery. They call it the loneliest road in America, and they're not wrong. Mile after mile of empty desert with maybe one car every half hour if you're lucky. The kind of road where if something goes wrong, you could be waiting a long time for help. I was about 40 mi east of Fallon when I saw her in my headlights. A woman standing on the shoulder, waving her arms. No car visible anywhere, just her in what looked like a waitress uniform. White top, dark pants, sensible shoes. She looked young, maybe mid-20s. And she was clearly in distress. I started slowing down. Every trucker knows the unwritten rule. You help people when you can. Flat tire, overheated engine, running out of gas. We've all been there. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was how isolated the spot was, or how she'd appeared so suddenly in an area where I hadn't seen another vehicle in 20 men. I pulled over anyway. Couldn't just leave someone stranded out there. She ran up to my passenger door before I'd even set the air brakes. When I rolled down the window, she looked relieved but also nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to follow her. "Oh, thank God," she said. "My car broke down about 5 miles back. I've been walking for over an hour. Can you give me a ride to the next town?" "What happened to your car?" "Radiator, I think, started overheating, then just died. I left it on the side of the road." I looked past her into the darkness. 5 miles back, I didn't see any car. It's probably just off the road a bit, hard to see from the highway. Please, I really need help. I work at the diner in Austin, and my shift starts at 6 m. If I'm late again, I'll lose my job. Austin was about 60 miles ahead. Reasonable story, reasonable request. But something still felt off. Her uniform was too clean for someone who'd been walking on a dusty highway for over an hour. No sweat, no dirt, no sign of the kind of wear you'd expect. "Let me call this in on my CB," I said. "Maybe someone else saw your car can arrange for a tow." "No, please don't do that. I just need a ride. I can't afford a tow truck anyway." The urgency in her voice made me pause. Most people in that situation would want all the help they could get, including professional roadside assistance, but she seemed almost afraid of the idea. "Look, I know how this looks," she continued. "A woman alone on the highway asking for rides from truckers. But I'm desperate here. My phone's dead. I haven't seen another car in forever, and you're the first person to stop." She had a point. If someone had been stranded out here for hours, they'd probably take help from anyone willing to offer it. And I've given rides to stranded motorists before. It's part of the job. "All right," I said, "but I've got to check you for weapons first. Company policy." Her face went pale. "Weapons? I'm just a waitress. It's nothing personal. I don't know you. You don't know me. Quick pat down, then we're good." She backed away from the truck. "I can't. I mean, that's not. Look, can't you just trust me? I'm obviously not dangerous." The way she reacted bothered me. Most innocent people understand the need for basic safety precautions, especially in a situation like this. But she seemed genuinely afraid of being searched. "Tell you what," I said. "I'll give you a ride, but you ride in the sleeper berth, not the passenger seat. And the partition stays closed until we get to Austin." She looked like she was going to argue, then nodded quickly. "Okay, fine. Whatever you need to feel safe." I climbed down and opened the passenger door. Then the sleeper berthed. She climbed up without another word, and I closed the partition that separated the sleeper from the cab. Basic precaution. If someone was going to try something, they'd have a harder time reaching me from back there. I got back on the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In my mirror, I could see light from the sleeper area, like she was moving around back there, but she was being quiet about it. After about 10 miles, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the distinctive click beep of a cell phone taking a picture. "Everything okay back there?" I called out. "Fine, just settling in." But I'd heard what I'd heard. She was taking pictures of something, the inside of my truck, maybe my logbook, my GPS, something. I thought about pulling over right then, but we were still in the middle of nowhere. Better to get to a populated area first. A few miles later, I heard her talking quietly, too quietly to make out the words, but it sounded like she was on the phone, the same phone she'd claimed was dead. I keyed my CB radio. "Breaker 119, this is Desert Rose eastbound on Highway 50, mile marker 102. "Anyone copy?" A voice came back immediately. "Desert Rose, this is Midnight Cowboy. I copy you clear." "Midnight Cowboy, I've got a passenger with me. Picked her up stranded on the highway. Just wanted someone to know in case, well, just in case." "Copy that, Desert Rose. You want me to notify anyone?" I thought about it. "Not yet. Just keep an ear on this frequency." "Will do. Stay safe out there." From the sleeper berth, I heard the woman's voice again, still talking quietly, but now I could make out a few words. "Big rig, eastbound. Should be there in about an hour." I grabbed my CB handset again. "Midnight Cowboy, you still monitoring?" "Roger. Desert Rose, change of plans. I'm going to pull off at the next exit. Find somewhere public to drop off my passenger. Something wrong." Before I could answer, the partition between the cab and sleeper slid open. The woman was leaning forward close enough that I could smell her perfume. Too close. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. "Just checking in with dispatch. Company policy for passenger pickups." "You don't need to do that. I'll be out of your hair soon enough." She was looking at my CB radio, my GPS display, the controls on my dashboard, studying them like she was memorizing the layout. And I noticed something else. Her hands were stained. Dark marks on her fingers and palm, like ink or grease. "What's that on your hands?" I asked. She looked down, then quickly pulled her hands back into the sleeper area. "Just dirt from walking on the highway, but that wasn't dirt. It looked more like she'd been handling something mechanical, something that would leave that kind of residue. Maybe car parts or maybe something else." We passed a sign, "Austin, 25 me." Almost there. I could drop her off at the first public place and be done with this whole situation. Actually, she said, I just remembered. I don't need to go all the way to Austin. There's a truck stop coming up, exit 168. You can drop me there. I checked my atlas. Exit 168 was about 10 miles ahead, but according to my map, there was no truck stop there. Just a small side road leading into the desert. I don't see a truck stop on my map. It's new. Just opened last month. My boyfriend works there. He can give me a ride the rest of the way. Every alarm bell in my head was going off now. The story kept changing, the details kept shifting. And why would she want to get off at some remote exit instead of going to the actual town where she claimed to work? Tell you what, I said. Let's just continue to Austin. I'll drop you at the diner where you work. That way you won't be late for your shift. No. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. I mean, no. The truck stop is fine. Really, I don't want to put you out of your way. Austin wasn't out of my way. It was directly on my route, but she seemed desperate to avoid going there. Almost panicked at the suggestion. The exit 168 sign appeared in my headlights. No lights visible down the side road, no indication of any kind of business, just darkness stretching away into the desert. I drove past the exit without slowing. Hey, you missed it, she said. Sorry, didn't see it in time. We'll catch the next one. She was quiet for a moment, then I heard her moving around in the sleeper again. When she spoke next, her voice had changed harder. Less of the helpless, stranded motorist act. You know, I really need to get off at the next exit. It's important. Why? Because people are waiting for me, people who don't like to be kept waiting. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Not a threat exactly, but definitely not the words of someone who just needed a ride to work. I grabbed my CB. Midnight, Cowboy Desert Rose, you still monitoring? Roger, Desert Rose, go ahead. I'm approaching Austin, planning to stop at the first public place I can find. If you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, might want to call someone. Copy that. What's your 20? Before I could answer, the woman was standing right behind my seat. I hadn't heard her move, hadn't seen her in my mirrors. She was just suddenly there, close enough to touch my shoulder. Hang up the radio, she said quietly. I could see Austin's lights ahead, maybe 5 miles away. Populated area. Help available. Witnesses almost there. Sit back down, please. We're almost to town. I said, hang up the radio. I felt something press against the back of my neck. Not hard, just enough pressure to let me know it was there. Could have been a finger, could have been something else. Midnight Cowboy. This is Desert Rose, I said into the handset, approaching Austin now. Everything's fine here. The pressure on my neck increased slightly. Desert Rose, you sound a little tense. You sure everything's okay? I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him to call the police. Wanted to scream for help. But whatever was touching my neck hadn't moved, and the woman was standing perfectly still behind me. Yeah, just tired. Long night. Desert Rose clear. I hung up the handset. The pressure on my neck disappeared. Good choice, she said, settling back into the sleeper area. Now there's a rest area coming up just before town. Pull in there. I checked my map. There was indeed a rest area marked, but it was one of those small desert stops, just picnic tables and vault toilets. No facilities, no security, the kind of place where no one would hear you scream. I thought you needed to get to work. Change of plans. Some people want to meet you. What people? The kind who've been tracking your route, your cargo, your schedule. You're very predictable, you know. Same highways, same stops, same everything. Makes it easy to plan ahead. My cargo machine part's worth maybe $50,000. Not a fortune, but enough to kill for if someone was desperate enough. The rest area exit appeared ahead, dark, isolated, surrounded by empty desert. If I pulled in there, I might not drive out again. I kept my foot on the accelerator and drove past the exit. I told you to pull over, she said, and I told you we're going to town. Austin's city limits sign flashed by. Streetlights, buildings, the promise of safety just ahead. I could see the glow of a gas station, probably with security cameras and maybe even customers at this hour. The woman was moving again, and I could hear her talking on her phone, but louder now, not trying to hide it. He didn't stop. Yeah, he's heading into town. No, I can't. Too many people around now. I pulled into the first well-lit business. I saw a 24-hour truck stop with multiple cameras and several other vehicles parked outside. Before I'd even set the brakes, she was climbing out the passenger door. "Thanks for the ride," she said, like nothing had happened. I watched her walk away, not toward the truck stop building, but toward a dark sedan parked at the edge of the lot. The car had been running. I could see exhaust from the tailpipe, which meant someone had been waiting for her. She got in the passenger seat and the car drove away without turning on its headlights until it reached the highway. I sat there for a long time trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had she been planning to rob me, signal accomplices to intercept my truck on some lonely stretch of road? Or was I just paranoid, reading too much into a series of innocent coincidences? I never found out. But 3 weeks later, I was talking to another driver at a truck stop in Reno, and he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He'd been driving the same route I'd taken, Highway 50 through Nevada, about a week after my encounter. Around mile marker 95, he'd seen something that bothered him. A car parked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, but no one around. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere. When he'd called it in to the state police, they'd told him they'd gotten several reports about that car over the past month, always in the same area, always apparently abandoned. But every time they'd sent someone to investigate, the car was gone. According to the officer he'd talked to, they suspected it might be some kind of decoy used to make the area look like a breakdown zone, a place where someone might legitimately need help. The thing that really got to me was the description of the car. A sedan, dark-colored with Nevada plates. The same car I'd watched that woman get into outside the truck stop in Austin. I should have asked more questions when they offered me that job. 30 years of hauling freight, and I'd never seen a rate that high for such a short run. $2,500 to take a single crate from a warehouse in Detroit to an address in rural Michigan, maybe $200 total. Easy money, or so I thought. The pickup was scheduled for midnight, which should have been my first red flag. Most legitimate businesses don't operate loading docks at that hour, but the dispatcher had been insistent. The customer specifically requested a midnight pickup, and they were paying premium rates for the convenience. I found the warehouse in an industrial district that had seen better days. Half the buildings were empty, streetlights were broken, and there wasn't another soul around. The address led me to a nondescript metal building with no company signs, just a number painted on a steel door. A man was waiting for me in the loading bay, thin, nervous, wearing coveralls and work gloves despite the warm October night. He didn't introduce himself, just pointed to a wooden crate sitting on a pallet. "That's it," he said. "Handle it carefully." The crate was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 4 feet by 2 feet, but surprisingly heavy when we loaded it with the forklift. Had to be at least 300 lb, which seemed excessive for something that size. "What's in it?" I asked. "Machinery parts, very delicate, very expensive. The customer is paying extra for careful handling." He handed me the paperwork, but when I looked at it, something seemed off. The shipper information was mostly blank, just a post office box for an address. The consignee was listed as private collector with only a rural route number for delivery. "I need more complete shipping information," I said. "That's all you get. The customer values privacy. You'll be met at the delivery point." He was already walking away, clearly wanting me gone. Against my better judgment, I secured the load and headed out. $1,500 was $1,500, and I needed the money. The delivery address was in the middle of nowhere, about 20 miles north of Flint. I'd driven through that area before. Mostly farmland, scattered houses, the kind of place where neighbors are miles apart. According to my GPS, I'd arrive around 2:30 a.m. About an hour into the drive, I started noticing an odd smell. Sweet and chemical, like cleaning supplies mixed with something organic. I checked my trailer ventilation, thinking maybe diesel fumes were backing up. but the smell persisted. I pulled over at a rest stop to investigate. The smell was definitely coming from the trailer, stronger near the wooden crate. I walked around the load, checking the tie-downs, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was moisture seeping from the bottom of the crate. Not a lot, just dark spots on the pallet, but enough to leave a small puddle on the trailer floor. Whatever was inside that crate was leaking. I climbed down and called the dispatch number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried the pickup location, but no one answered. Just me, a mysterious leaking crate, and a delivery address in the middle of nowhere. The smart thing would have been to turn around, take the load back to Detroit, demand answers. But I was already halfway there, and I kept telling myself it was probably just hydraulic fluid from whatever machinery was inside. I got back on the road, but the smell was getting stronger. By the time I turned off the main highway onto the rural route, it was so bad I had to crack the windows, sweet cloying with an undertone that reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. The GPS led me down increasingly narrow roads, past dark farmhouses and empty fields. No street lights, no traffic, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. The kind of isolated area where you could scream and no one would hear you. The delivery address turned out to be a dirt driveway leading back into a wooded area. No house visible from the road, no mailbox, just a reflective sign with the route number nailed to a tree. I almost missed it. I turned down the driveway, branches scraping against my trailer as the road narrowed. After about a 4-mile, I came to a clearing with a small house and several outbuildings. No lights in the house, but I could see a vehicle parked beside one of the sheds, a van with no windows in the back. I parked and climbed down, expecting someone to come out and meet me. Nothing. The house was dark and I couldn't hear any signs of life, but the paperwork said to deliver at this address and someone had to be expecting this load. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I tried the doorbell, but it didn't seem to work. I was about to go back to my truck when I heard voices coming from behind the house. Following the sound, I found 3 men standing near the windowless van talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw me and one of them walked over. "You the driver?" "Yeah. Got a delivery for this address." He looked at his watch. "You're early, only by about 10 minutes. Where do you want the crate?" Instead of answering, he walked past me toward my trailer. The other 2 followed, and I noticed they were both wearing latex gloves. At 2:30 in the morning, that seemed strange. "We'll take care of unloading," the first man said. "You can go. I need a signature for delivery." "No signatures. You were never here." That sent a chill down my spine. Legitimate deliveries always require signatures, insurance purposes, if nothing else. But these guys clearly wanted no record of this transaction. "Look, I need proper documentation. My company requires your company sent you here to deliver a crate. You delivered it, end of story." One of the other men had opened my trailer and was examining the wooden crate. He said something I couldn't quite hear, and the first man's expression changed. "There a problem?" I asked. "No problem. Just checking the condition of the merchandise." "Merchandise? Not machinery parts, not equipment. Merchandise." The man near the trailer was taking pictures with his phone, documenting every angle of the crate. The way he was handling it carefully but not reverently made me think he was checking for damage rather than just recording the delivery. "What exactly is in that crate?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about. Just back your truck up to the shed and we'll handle the rest." I looked at the shed he was pointing to. It was larger than the others with heavy doors and no windows, the kind of building where you could do anything and no one would know. "I think I'll just leave it on the trailer. You can unload it yourself." "No, we need it in the shed." "Why?" "Because that's where it belongs." There was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a request. I looked at the 3 men all watching me intently and realized I was outnumbered in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service. I backed the trailer up to the shed. One of them operated a forklift that must have been hidden inside while the other supervised. They were efficient like they'd done this before. Within minutes, the crate was inside the building and the doors were closed. "Pleasure doing business," the first man said, handing me an envelope. "Cash payment as agreed." I opened the envelope. $1,500. Bills all crisp and new, but I'd never agreed to cash payment. The original job sheet had specified company check. This wasn't the arrangement. It's the arrangement now. And remember, you were never here. I wanted to argue, wanted to demand proper paperwork, wanted to ask what the hell was really going on. But three men in latex gloves standing next to a windowless van in the middle of the woods at 3 a.m. wasn't the place to pick a fight. I got in my truck and left, but the whole way back to the main road I kept checking my mirrors. No one followed, but I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. The smell lingered in my trailer for days, no matter how much I cleaned it. Sweet and chemical with that organic undertone. I finally recognized it was the smell from a veterinary clinic where I'd once delivered medical supplies, the smell of formaldehyde. I never heard anything more about that delivery. No follow-up calls, no additional paperwork, no questions from my dispatcher. It was like the job had never existed, except for the $1,500 in cash that I deposited in 3 different banks. A few weeks later, I was having coffee with another driver at a truck stop outside Detroit. He mentioned picking up a weird job from a warehouse in the same industrial district. Midnight pickup, anonymous customer, premium rates for a short haul. "Let me guess," I said. "Small wooden crate, really heavy, heading to a rural address." He stared at me. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess. You deliver it." "Yeah, but the strangest thing happened when I got to the address. It was just an empty field. No house, no buildings, nothing. GPS said I was in the right place, but there was nobody there." "What did you do with the load?" "Sat there for an hour, then brought it back to the warehouse. But when I got there, the place was locked up tight. No one around. No way to return the crate." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. So I opened it, and empty. Nothing inside but packing material and a couple of concrete blocks for weight. I thought about that conversation for a long time afterward. If his crate was empty, what had been in mine? What kind of merchandise requires formaldehyde, latex gloves, and absolute secrecy? I've hauled a lot of strange loads over the years, but I've never stopped wondering what I delivered to that shed in the woods. And sometimes late at night when I'm driving through rural areas, I find myself looking for that dirt driveway, that clearing, that windowless van. Part of me hopes I never find it again, but part of me wonders what would happen if I did. Music. I've been through thousands of way stations in my 18 years of driving, but the one on I-40 outside Amarillo still gives me nightmares. It looked normal enough from the highway. Standard dot setup with scales, inspection bays, and a small office building. But something was very wrong with the people working there that night. It was a Tuesday in November around 11 p.m. I was hauling furniture from North Carolina to Phoenix, running a little behind schedule due to weather delays. The all commercial vehicles must stop sign was lit up, so I pulled into the right lane and followed the other trucks toward the scales. There were maybe 6 rigs ahead of me, which was unusual for that time of night. Most way stations don't stay busy past 900 p.m., but here we were, lined up like rush hour traffic. The truck in front of me had been sitting there for at least 10 minutes without moving. I grabbed my CB handset. "Hey, driver in front of the blue Peterbilt, what's the holdup?" No response. I tried again, adding my location. Still nothing. That was strange. Truckers are usually quick to share information about delays, especially at way stations. After another 15 minutes, the line finally started moving. But instead of the usual quick roll over the scales and go routine, each truck was being directed to the inspection bays, every single one. In 20 years of driving, I'd never seen a way station inspect every truck during a single shift. When my turn came, a DOT officer waved me toward Bay 3. He was wearing the standard uniform, but something about his demeanor seemed off. too intense, too focused, like he was looking for something specific. I parked where he indicated and climbed down with my logbook and registration. The officer approached, but instead of the usual pleasant professionalism you get from most DOT personnel, he seemed almost excited. "Evening," he said, though it sounded more like a statement than a greeting. "We're conducting enhanced inspections tonight. Need to take a look at your cargo." Enhanced inspections, new federal mandate, checking for compliance with updated transportation regulations. I'd never heard of any new mandates, but regulations change constantly in this industry. Still, something felt wrong about the whole situation. He led me to the back of my trailer where two other officers were already waiting. They had clipboards and cameras, but they were also wearing latex gloves, the kind you see in medical facilities, not at routine truck inspections. "What kind of cargo you hauling?" the first officer asked. "Furniture, couches, chairs, dining sets, bills of lighting are in the cab. We'll need to see inside the trailer." I opened the rear doors and they immediately started taking pictures, not of the cargo, but of the trailer itself, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, like they were documenting every inch of the interior. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Just standard procedure." "How long has this cargo been loaded?" 3 days. Picked it up in High Point on Saturday. One of the officers was taking notes, writing down everything I said. The other was using some kind of handheld device, scanning the trailer walls like he was looking for something hidden. "Any stops between pickup and here?" "Just for fuel and required rest breaks." "Why?" "Need to verify chain of custody. Who has access to your truck when you're not in it?" "Nobody. I keep it locked and I don't let anyone else drive. What about when you're sleeping?" The question caught me off guard. "I sleep in the cab. The truck is never unattended." He made another note, then walked around to the front of my truck. "We're going to need to inspect the cab as well." "The cab? Why?" "Enhanced inspection includes the entire vehicle, federal mandate." I'd been through level 1 inspections before, the most thorough kind, and they'd never gone through my cab like this. But these officers seemed to have unlimited time and were being incredibly methodical about everything. They spent 20 minutes going through my sleeper berth, checking every compartment, every storage space. They photographed my logbooks, my fuel receipts, even my personal belongings. One of them was particularly interested in my cell phone. "Mind if we take a look at this?" "Actually, yeah, I do mind. That's my personal property. We're not going to take it. Just need to verify it's not being used for any illegal communications." "What illegal communications?" "Coordinating with other drivers, sharing information about law enforcement locations, that kind of thing." That made no sense. Sharing information about DOT locations wasn't illegal. It was standard practice among truckers. But the officer was holding my phone like he expected me to hand it over. "I'd prefer to keep my phone with me," I said. He stared at me for a long moment, then made another note on his clipboard. "That's your right. But we'll need to document your refusal to cooperate." "Refusal to cooperate with what?" "You haven't explained what you're actually looking for." Instead of answering, he walked over to confer with the other officers. They were talking quietly, occasionally glancing in my direction. After a few minutes, one of them approached with a small device I'd never seen before. "We need to take some readings from your trailer," he said. "What kind of readings?" "Chemical residue analysis, making sure nothing hazardous has been transported." He ran the device along the interior walls of my trailer, watching a small display screen. Every few seconds it would beep and he'd mark something on his clipboard. The whole process was taking way too long. I looked around and noticed that none of the other trucks that had been inspected were leaving. They were all parked in a separate area. Drivers standing around looking confused and worried. "How much longer is this going to take?" I asked. "Depends on what we find. Could be a few more minutes. Could be a few more hours." "Hours? I've got a delivery schedule to meet. Your schedule is less important than compliance with federal regulations. I walked over to where the other drivers were waiting and struck up a conversation with a guy hauling steel coils. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Almost 2 hours. They went through my truck like they were looking for buried treasure." "Find anything?" That's the weird part. They didn't seem to find anything wrong, but they won't let me leave. Keep saying they need to verify something with their supervisor. Another driver overheard us. Same here. 3 hours and counting. They photographed everything. Took samples from my trailer. Even asked me about my route history going back 6 months. Samples. Scraped stuff off the trailer walls. Collected some kind of residue from the floor. Said it was for chemical analysis. I looked around at the other drivers. All of us hauling different types of cargo. All from different origins. All heading to different destinations. The only thing we had in common was this route through Texas. One of the officers approached our group. "Drivers, we need you to provide detailed information about your cargo origins, who loaded your trucks, what warehouses you picked up from, what routes you've taken in the past month." "Why?" asked the steel coil driver. "We're investigating potential security breaches in the commercial transportation network. Need to trace possible contamination sources." "Contamination with what?" "That's classified information, but we need your cooperation to ensure public safety." I thought about that phrase, classified information. DOT officers don't usually deal with classified matters. That's more FBI or Homeland Security territory. "Can I see some identification?" I asked. The officer hesitated, then showed me a badge. It looked official enough, but something about it seemed off. The photo didn't quite match his face, and the badge number was partially obscured. "Are you actually due?" I pressed. "We're working with DOT on this investigation, multi-agency task force." That didn't answer my question. I looked around and noticed there were no regular way station personnel visible anywhere, just these 3 officers with their clipboards and devices. "I think I'd like to call my dispatcher," I said. "Phone service is limited out here, might not get through." I checked my phone. Full bars. Strong signal. He was lying. I walked back to my truck, intending to call not just my dispatcher, but maybe the state police as well. But as I reached for the door handle, one of the officers appeared beside me. "Where are you going?" "To make a phone call." "I'd prefer if you stayed with the other drivers, for security purposes." "Security purposes. We need to keep all drivers in one location during the investigation." I realized then that we weren't being inspected. We were being detained by people who might not even be real law enforcement officers. "I want to leave." I said, "That's not possible right now. Your truck is part of an ongoing investigation." "Investigation into what?" "I can't discuss the details, but I can tell you that several trucks matching your route profile have been flagged for potential security violations." "What kind of violations?" "Unauthorized cargo, undocumented stops, suspicious communications. We need to clear each vehicle before it can continue." None of that made sense. My cargo was fully documented. All my stops were logged, and I hadn't had any suspicious communications with anyone. I looked at my watch, 1:30 a.m. We'd been here for over 2 hours, and I was starting to think these weren't routine inspections at all. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold in the parking area where they were holding the other trucks. There were now twice as many vehicles as when I'd arrived, but I hadn't seen any new trucks come in. Where were all these additional vehicles coming from? I walked over to get a better look and realized they weren't all commercial trucks. Some were pickup trucks, vans, even a few cars, all with out-of-state plates, all apparently being inspected by the same officers. One of the pickup drivers caught my eye and walked over. "You've been here long?" he asked. "Couple hours." "You 4 hours. They keep saying they're waiting for some kind of clearance, but nobody will tell me what for." "What are you hauling?" "Nothing. Just driving cross-country, moving to California, but they insist my truck needs to be inspected anyway." That's when it hit me. These weren't DOT inspections. They were stopping everyone, commercial and private vehicles alike. But why? And who were these people really? I decided I'd had enough. I started walking toward the exit, but one of the officers intercepted me. "Sir, I need you to return to the waiting area. Am I under arrest?" "No, but then I'm leaving." I continued toward my truck, but he grabbed my arm. "I can't let you do that. On what authority?" He didn't answer, just tightened his grip. That's when I knew for certain these weren't real law enforcement officers. Real cops would have arrested me by now or let me go. They wouldn't be playing this ambiguous detention game. I pulled away and kept walking. He followed, but didn't try to stop me again. Maybe because other drivers were watching. Maybe because he realized his cover was blown. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. In my mirrors, I could see the officers talking urgently into radios, but nobody tried to physically block my exit. I drove out of that way station as fast as I could legally manage, expecting to be pursued by real police at any moment. But nobody followed. I just disappeared into the night, leaving behind whatever strange operation was being conducted at that fake inspection station. I reported the incident to my company and to the Texas DOT, but when investigators checked the location 2 days later, they found it operating normally with regular staff. No record of any enhanced inspections, no multi-agency task force, no officers matching the descriptions I provided. The way station personnel claimed they'd been closed for maintenance that Tuesday night, and their logs showed no commercial vehicles processed between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. According to the official record, I was never there. But I still have the photos on my phone that I took while waiting. Pictures of my truck, the other vehicles, those officers with their clipboards and latex gloves. Evidence that something happened that night, even if nobody wants to acknowledge what it was. Music I should have kept driving when my engine started making that noise outside Flagstaff, but I was hauling temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals that couldn't afford a breakdown in the Arizona desert. So when the GPS showed a truck repair shop just 5 miles off I-40, I took the exit. Desert Diesel Repair looked legitimate enough, a large metal building with several service bays and a couple of trucks parked outside. But as I pulled into the lot, I noticed something odd. Despite the trucks parked there, I didn't see any mechanics working or signs of an active repair facility. The mechanic who emerged from a service bay was late 50s, wearing coveralls with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades outdoors. He listened to my engine and quickly diagnosed a failing main bearing. "Bad news," he said. "Keep driving and you'll destroy the whole engine." "But I can have it running good as new in a day or two, maybe 3,500 with parts and labor." I was stuck. Couldn't risk driving with a failing bearing. Couldn't afford to lose my refrigerated load. "How do you know I had pharmaceuticals in my trailer?" I asked after mentioning my medicine cargo. He paused. "You said medicine that needs refrigeration." But I'd said medicine, not pharmaceuticals specifically. Small detail, but it stuck with me. He moved my truck into the bay, positioning it at the rear of the building next to a loading dock I hadn't noticed. While checking my reefer unit, he was examining the temperature settings and cargo door lock like he was looking for something specific. I noticed the other trucks parked around the property weren't empty. They all had refrigerated trailers attached, all running, all maintaining temperature like they were carrying perishable cargo. But the mechanic claimed some were customers, others were salvage projects. "Where are all the drivers?" I asked. "Most catch rides to town while we work. Greyhound Station about 20 minutes east." But when I walked closer to examine one truck, I could see personal items on the dashboard. A CB radio, an open logbook, like the driver had just stepped away. The office felt wrong too clean, too organized for a truck repair shop. No parts catalogs, no coffee-stained paperwork, walls with new-looking calendars. When I decided to leave and try to make it to Phoenix, he stepped in front of me. "Can't let you do that. Too dangerous with a failing bearing. It's my truck, my decision. Once a vehicle enters our facility with mechanical problems, we're liable if we let it leave in unsafe condition. Insurance regulations." That was nonsense. but he was blocking my path. I looked around the property again. All those trucks with refrigerated trailers running, but apparently abandoned by their drivers. When I tried to call my dispatcher, he claimed there was no cell service, though I'd had full bars 30 minutes ago. The landline was supposedly out too. Walking around the building, I found something that made my stomach drop. A pile of license plates from different states, some bent and damaged, like they'd been forcibly removed. "Those are old plates from salvage vehicles," he explained when he caught me looking. "Where are the vehicles? Sold for parts mostly, but if the trucks were scrapped, why were there so many complete rigs with running reefer units parked around the property?" "I want my truck back," I said. "Can't release it in unsafe condition." He walked to my truck and drove it deeper into the building, past heavy doors I hadn't noticed. The doors closed behind it with locks engaging. "Your truck will be ready in a day or two," he called out, smiling coldly, assuming everything goes according to plan. I ran toward the highway in 110-degree heat, not caring about anything except getting away. It took me 2 hours to reach the interstate before a state trooper picked me up. When he drove me back, following my directions, the buildings were still there but looked abandoned, rusted, empty for years. No trucks, no equipment, no recent activity. My truck was nowhere to be seen. The trooper ran plates I'd memorized from other trucks. 3 had been reported stolen in the past 6 months, all carrying refrigerated cargo. I never got my truck back, but 6 months later, I read about a medical research facility shut down for unauthorized experiments. The facility was in an industrial district outside Birmingham in a building that looked very familiar. According to the article, investigators found evidence of illegal clinical trials and missing research subjects. The facility had operated for months using contractors who may not have known the full scope of the operation. I still drive freight, but I'm more careful about loads I accept. And sometimes I think about those containers and wonder if some people who signed up for experimental treatments in Birmingham ever made it home, or if they ended up being transported to places where no one would ask questions about what happened when things went wrong. Music. I'd been working with dispatcher Maria for 3 years when she disappeared. One day she was routing my loads and checking in twice daily. The next day someone else was using her call sign, claiming to be Maria, but definitely wasn't. It started Monday morning, hauling auto parts from Detroit to Dallas. The voice that answered was different, similar enough that I might not have noticed if I hadn't talked to Maria almost every day for years. "This is Big Dog checking out of Detroit. Over. Copy that, Big Dog. This is Maria. Have a safe trip." Wrong cadence. Too formal. Real Maria always called me Danny and usually made weather comments. This person sounded like they were reading from a script. "Maria, you feeling okay? You sound different, just tired. Check in when you hit Indianapolis." Over. She signed off without the usual "drive safe, Danny." That ended every conversation at Indianapolis. Same voice, same overly formal tone. She didn't ask for my ETA, which Maria always did, and gave me wrong delivery window information, 8:00 a.m. instead of the 6:00 a.m. Maria had specifically mentioned last week I tested her with a fake question about damaged freight in Memphis. Real Maria would have immediately said she didn't know what I was talking about. "Which customer?" came the confused response after a long pause. The construction in Louisville was worse than expected. Maria had warned me about it and given an alternate route. This person either didn't know or didn't care if I was late. When I called in the delay, she just said, "Continue as planned." No questions about the route, no frustration. Maria never left routing decisions up to drivers and had strong opinions about everything. I tried calling Maria's direct extension from my sleeper. Generic corporate voicemail, not hers, though it was definitely her number I'd been calling for 3 years. Next morning, approaching Dallas, my phone rang. Unknown number, but showing my company's name. "Danny, this is Maria. Thank God I reached you." It was her. The real Maria, sounding stressed. "Maria, where have you been? Someone's been using your call sign. I've been out sick for 4 days, food poisoning, been in hospital. I just got back and someone's been using my login credentials to access dispatch. Who? We don't know. Danny, according to the system, you're not supposed to be going to Dallas. Your load was rerouted yesterday to a warehouse in Louisiana. She read off an address in the middle of nowhere, the kind of isolated place where trucks could disappear. Don't go there, she said. Someone's been impersonating me, changing routes, redirecting loads. When she called back, the Dallas receiver said they'd canceled the load last week, talking to me directly. But Maria never called them, and I never called them either. There's more, Maria said. 3 other drivers had similar experiences. Strange calls from dispatch, route changes that don't match records. Jimmy Santos followed rerouting instructions to some Arkansas warehouse 6 days ago. Nobody's heard from him since. You think someone's targeting your drivers? Someone's been studying our operation, learning procedures, figuring out how to manipulate the system. They know which drivers trust dispatchers, which follow instructions without question. How did they get your login? Those credentials are heavily protected. Either someone hacked from inside or they have access to information they shouldn't have. She gave me an emergency contact and told me not to make any more dispatch calls. I made it to Dallas safely, but the receiver insisted they'd canceled, showing phone logs of calls to Maria about cancellation. Someone else had been involved. Someone with enough knowledge to impersonate multiple people in the shipping chain. 3 weeks later, Jimmy Santos's truck was found abandoned in an Arkansas ravine, 50 miles from the fake delivery address. No sign of Jimmy, no cargo, no explanation. The company investigated but found no evidence of hacking, no unauthorized access records, no way to trace the fake dispatcher using Maria's credentials. I still drive the same routes, but don't trust dispatch calls anymore. Every voice has to be verified, every instruction double-checked, every route change questioned. Because somewhere out there, someone is still watching, still learning, still figuring out new ways to make trucks and drivers disappear. The worst part is knowing it could happen again tomorrow. A familiar voice on the radio claiming to be someone you trust, giving directions to a place you'll never come back from. The only question is whether you'll recognize the deception before it's too late. I'd been driving the same route between Atlanta and Jacksonville for 7 years, and I thought I knew every rest stop along the way. But on that Tuesday night in October, I found one I'd never seen before. It was around midnight, and I was running behind schedule after construction delays outside Monwan. My GPS showed a rest area in 5 miles. But when I reached the location, there was nothing there. I kept driving until I saw lights ahead. Not bright fluorescent lighting, but softer, warmer lights. A sign appeared. Peachtree Rest Area, Truckers Welcome. I'd never heard of it, but Georgia has dozens of facilities that don't always show up on GPS. The rest area was surprisingly busy for past midnight. Maybe 20 trucks parked in neat rows, several cars, people walking around like it was midday. A man in khakis and polo shirt approached as I checked my tie-downs. Tourist clothes. Not typical for a trucker's rest area after midnight. First time here? He asked. Yeah, didn't know this place existed. Most people don't. Very peaceful, very relaxing. Perfect place to get some rest. Something unsettling about how he emphasized rest, like it meant more than sleep. The air smelled sweet and floral, like funeral homes. The visitors' center was well appointed with comfortable seating, gift shop, even a coffee bar, but the staff behind the counter all had the same peaceful, dreamy expressions. Would you like something to help you relax? Asked the woman at the coffee bar. The coffee was excellent, but had an herbal aftertaste I couldn't identify. That's our special blend, local ingredients, very calming. Most visitors find it helps them sleep better. I looked around. The other people, truckers, families, elderly couples, all had the same relaxed, vacant expressions as the staff. Nobody was talking, complaining about traffic, or making phone calls. Just sitting quietly, some staring into space. You should consider staying the night. We have facilities for drivers who need extended rest periods. Extended rest periods. Some people find they need more than the usual break, much more. Walking back to my truck, I noticed the other truckers weren't doing usual break activities, checking equipment, calling dispatch. They were just standing around with that same peaceful, vacant look. I approached one leaning against a freightliner. "How's it going?" He turned with glassy, unfocused eyes. "Going fine. Very peaceful here. Very restful." "How long you've been stopped?" "Not sure. Time doesn't seem to matter much here. Just rest, just peace." "You planning to get back on the road soon?" "Eventually. When I'm ready. When they say I'm ready." I checked other trucks. One had logbook entries going back 3 weeks. 21 days straight at Peachtree Rest Area. No driver stays at a rest stop for 3 weeks. Another showed months of entries all at the same location. My hands were shaking and I realized I felt unusually calm myself. The coffee, something in it was affecting my judgment. I hurried to my truck and started the engine, but the man in khakis tapped on my window. "Leaving so soon? You seem tired. Might be dangerous to drive when you're not properly rested." "I'm fine. Roads can be dangerous for tired drivers. Sometimes it's better to stay somewhere safe until you're fully recovered." The way he said recovered made it sound like I was sick. His peaceful expression had something predatory now. I pulled out, and as I drove past the visitor center, I saw a staff at the windows watching me leave. Still smiling, still peaceful, but predatory. When I looked for the entrance ramp in my mirrors, I couldn't see it. No signs, no lights, like it had vanished. A week later, another driver mentioned losing time on a recent run, finding himself hours behind with no memory of where he'd stopped. I remember some rest area, having coffee, feeling really relaxed. Next thing I knew, I was back on highway, but my logbook showed 6 hours stopped. I only remember 30 minutes. Where was this? That's the weird part. Somewhere between Mon and Jacksonville. But when I tried to find it again, it wasn't there. I've made that route dozens of times since, always watching for Peachtree signs. Sometimes late at night when I'm tired, I think I see familiar lights in the distance. Warm, inviting lights promising rest and peace. But I always drive past them because I keep thinking about those logbooks, those drivers who'd been there for weeks, and the way staff smiled when they talked about extended rest periods. I think about what happens to drivers who stay too long, who drink too much of that special coffee, who let themselves sink into that peaceful, vacant state. Do they ever leave? Do they even want to? And sometimes when I'm really tired and that sweet floral smell drifts through my vents, I wonder if I'm strong enough to keep driving past those lights, or if one night I'll finally give. Music. I should have known something was wrong when they invited me to join their convoy. 26 years of driving solo, and I'd never had a group of truckers I barely knew ask me to run with them across 3 states. But fuel prices were killing me, and they promised better rates through group purchasing at specific stops. It started at a truck stop outside Little Rock. I grabbing dinner when 3 drivers approached my table. They introduced themselves as Mike, Steve, and Carlos. Said they'd noticed my truck and wondered if I wanted to join their efficiency group. They explained it like a legitimate business arrangement. Pulled fuel purchases, coordinated routes, shared information about traffic and road conditions. "We run together twice a month," Mike explained. He was the obvious leader, mid-50s with the kind of confidence that comes from decades on the road, always the same route. Little Rock to Denver, take care of each other, share resources, make better time than running solo. "How many trucks in your group?" "Depends on the run. Tonight we've got 12, including you. If you're interested, all experienced drivers, all professional." The financial benefits were tempting. Fuel discounts, shared toll costs, even group rates at truck stops. In an industry where every dollar matters, it sounded too good to pass up. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just have to follow the convoy protocols, stay in formation, maintain radio contact, stop where the group stops, basic coordination stuff." They showed me a route plan on a tablet, detailed spreadsheet showing fuel stops, rest breaks, even meal times. Very organized, very professional. The kind of planning that could save serious money on a long haul. All right, I'm in. Great. We roll at 6 a.m. sharp. Channel 15 for convoy communications. Follow my lead truck, maintain proper spacing, and everything will go smooth. That night, in my sleeper, I felt good about the decision. Running with a group would be a nice change from the isolation of solo driving, and the cost savings could make a real difference. We formed up the next morning in the truck stop parking lot. 12 big rigs, all well maintained, all with experienced drivers. Mike's truck took the lead. Mine was positioned fourth in line and the rest spread out behind. Very professional, very organized. The first few hours went exactly as planned. Good communication on the radio, steady pace, no problems. Mike would call out road conditions ahead, drivers would confirm their positions. Everything by the book. The fuel stop outside Fort Smith was exactly where the schedule said it would be, and the group discount was legitimate. But as we crossed into Oklahoma, I started noticing things that bothered me. First was the radio chatter between the official convoy communications. I was picking up fragments of other conversations on the same channel. Quiet exchanges between drivers using code words I didn't recognize. Package secure. Route clear. Timeline confirmed. Not the usual trucker talk about traffic and weather. Second was our route. According to the plan, we were taking secondary highways instead of interstates, supposedly to avoid construction and traffic. But some of these roads were adding significant miles, and construction delays were pretty predictable. Any experienced driver would know better routes. Third was the behavior, at stops. When we pulled into a truck stop outside Tulsa, the other drivers didn't scatter to fuel, eat, and rest like normal truckers. They stayed together, talking in small groups, constantly watching the other customers like they were security guards instead of drivers. "Everything okay?" I asked Mike during the fuel stop. "Sure, why? Just seems like you guys are pretty alert more than usual for a routine run. Can't be too careful these days. Lot of theft, lot of problems with cargo security. We watch out for each other, that made sense, but something about the way he said it bothered me. Like they weren't worried about random theft, but something more specific." "What kind of cargo you hauling?" I asked. "Electronics. Computer equipment mostly. You furniture, nothing too valuable." He nodded, but I caught him exchanging glances with Steve, like my cargo was somehow relevant to their plans. Back on the road, I started paying closer attention to the other trucks in our convoy. They all had similar modifications. Extra antennas, tinted windows, reinforced bumpers, the kind of upgrades you might expect from drivers who spent a lot of time in rough areas or carried high-value loads. But when I looked closer at some of the trailers, I noticed they were riding low, like they were fully loaded. Yet, several drivers had mentioned carrying partial loads or deadheading to Denver. The weight distribution didn't match their stories. Around noon, Mike called for an unscheduled stop at a small truck stop I'd never heard of. Not on any major highway, just a single building operation next to a grain elevator in the middle of nowhere. "Why are we stopping here?" I asked over the radio. "Refuel and equipment check. Standard procedure." "But we just fueled 3 hours ago, and this place looked like it hadn't seen major traffic in years." When we pulled in, I noticed there were no other customers, just our 12 trucks and a handful of employees who seemed to be expecting us. The fuel island attendant walked straight to Mike's truck like he knew exactly who we were. No casual greeting, no checking which pump to use, just direct business communication. Like this was a planned meeting, not a random fuel stop. I stayed in my cab while the others got out to check equipment. But instead of inspecting their trucks, they were having quiet conversations with the truck stop employees. Money changed hands. Small packages were exchanged, and everyone kept glancing at their watches like they were on a tight schedule. "Big dog, you coming in for coffee?" Steve called over the radio. "I'm good. Want to make up some time?" "Mike wants everyone inside for the route briefing." Route briefing. We'd already been given detailed plans, but 11 other drivers were walking toward the building. So I climbed down and followed. The truck stop interior was strange, clean, well-stocked. but empty except for our group. The employees all seemed to know exactly who we were and what we needed. Coffee was already prepared. Sandwiches were ready at the counter. Even the restrooms had fresh towels waiting. Feels like they were expecting us. I commented to Carlos. We've been using this stop for years. They take good care of regular customers. But this went beyond customer service. It felt like a planned rendezvous, not a random stop. And when I tried to pay for my coffee, the clerk refused payment. Already taken care of, he said without explaining who had paid or why. Mike gathered us around a table in the back corner, spreading out maps and schedules. We're making good time, but there's been a route change. Construction ahead is worse than expected, so we're taking Highway 412 instead of the planned route. He showed us the new path on his tablet. It would take us through even more remote areas, adding at least 2 hours to the trip, and it would put us on roads where cell service was spotty and other traffic was minimal. This is going to put us way behind schedule, I said. We'll make up the time. Trust me, this route is better in the long run. I looked around the table. None of the other drivers seemed concerned about the delay or the route change. In fact, they looked relieved, like this had been the plan all along. Actually, I think I'm going to split off here, I said. Take my own route to Denver. This detour doesn't work for my delivery schedule. The room went quiet. Mike set down his coffee cup and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, but very serious. Can't let you do that, partner. We run as a group for security reasons. Splitting up puts everyone at risk. At risk of what? Hijacking, theft, all kinds of problems. These roads can be dangerous for solo drivers. I'd driven solo for 26 years, including through some genuinely dangerous areas. But these were Oklahoma farm roads, not urban gang territory. I'll take my chances. I really think you should stick with the group, Steve said, for your own safety. There was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. And suddenly I realized that I might not be part of a legitimate efficiency group at all. I looked around the truck stop again. The employees were still watching us, but now they seemed more like guards than customer service staff. The parking lot was positioned so that our trucks were surrounded by buildings, making it hard to leave quickly, and my truck was in the middle of the convoy, blocked by vehicles in front and behind. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I need to use the restroom." Instead of going to the restroom, I headed for the exit. I wanted to get back to my truck, check my cargo, maybe call my dispatcher. But as I reached the door, one of the truck stop employees stepped in front of me. "Everything okay, sir?" "Just going back to my truck. Mike wanted everyone to stay inside until the briefing is finished. I'll just be a minute. Sorry, can't let you do that." I looked back at the table where the other drivers were, sitting. They were all watching me now, and Mike was talking quietly into a radio. Not the CB radio truckers normally use, but a small handheld device. That's when I realized I wasn't part of a convoy at all. I was part of something else entirely. Something that required isolated routes, coordinated stops, and drivers who couldn't leave when they wanted to. I thought about the cargo I was hauling. Furniture. Nothing special, not worth hijacking. But what if it wasn't about my cargo? What if it was about my truck, my route, my identity? What if they needed legitimate drivers with clean records to provide cover for whatever they were really doing? "I changed my mind about Denver," I said, walking back to the table. "Think I'll head back to Little Rock instead." Mike smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Too late for that, partner. We're all committed now. Besides, you signed an agreement." I had signed something the night before, but I'd assumed it was just a fuel purchasing contract. Now I wondered what I'd actually agreed to. "Let me see that paperwork again." "Don't have it with me. But don't worry, you'll get your share when we reach Denver." "Share of what?" I'd thought we were just sharing fuel costs, but the way he said it suggested something much more valuable was involved. I sat back down, but I was already planning my escape. Whatever this group was really doing, I wanted no part of it, and the longer I stayed, the harder it would be to leave. 20 minutes later, Mike announced it was time to get back on the road. As we walked to our trucks, I noticed the truck stop employees were watching from the windows. Watching, not just observing, like they were making sure we all left according to plan. I climbed into my cab and started the engine. But instead of pulling into convoy formation, I turned toward the exit. In my mirrors, I could see the other drivers scrambling, talking urgently into their radios. Mike's voice crackled over channel 15. "Big dog, you're going the wrong direction. Changed my mind about Denver. Thanks for the company." Big dog returned to formation. That's an order. An order, not a request from a fellow trucker, but a command from someone who expected to be obeyed. I switched off the CB and headed for the highway, pressing the accelerator harder than I'd ever pressed it before. In my mirrors, I could see the convoy forming up behind me, not scattering to continue their own routes, but following. All 12 trucks moving as a unit, staying together like a pack hunting prey. I never found out what they were really transporting or what my role was supposed to be in their operation. But 3 weeks later, I saw a news report about a multi-state smuggling ring that used legitimate truckers as unknowing cover for their activities. The authorities had raided several truck stops, arrested dozens of drivers, and seized millions of dollars in contraband. The truck stop where we'd had our route briefing was mentioned specifically, according to the report. It had been used as a coordination center for illegal shipments with legitimate drivers recruited to provide cover and credibility. I never heard from Mike, Steve, or Carlos again. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I see convoys in my mirrors, groups of trucks running together, maintaining formation, coordinating their movements like they're part of something bigger than just transportation. And I always wonder how many of those drivers know what they're really hauling and how many are just along for the ride, thinking they've joined an efficiency group when they've actually become part of something much more dangerous. The scary part isn't what I might have been carrying that day. It's thinking about how easy it would have been to become part of their operation without ever realizing it. How many drivers out there think they're just saving money on fuel when they're actually providing cover for criminal activities? Sometimes I wonder if I should have stayed, learned more about what they were doing. But then, I remember the way those employees watched us leave, and the way Mike's voice changed when I tried to break away from the group. Some convoys aren't about efficiency or safety. They're about something much darker. And once you're part of them, leaving becomes a lot more complicated than just taking a different exit. I should have asked more questions when they offered me that job. $1,500 to take a single crate from a warehouse in Detroit to rural Michigan. Maybe 200 menors total. Easy money. Or so I thought. The pickup was scheduled for midnight at a warehouse in an industrial district. Half the buildings were empty, streetlights broken, and there wasn't another soul around. A thin, nervous man in coveralls was waiting with a wooden crate on a pallet. "Handle it carefully," he said. "Machinery parts, very delicate, very expensive." The crate was smaller than expected, but surprisingly heavy, at least $300. The paperwork was mostly blank, just a P.O. box for shipper and private collector for consignee. "I need more complete shipping information," I insisted. "That's all you get," was the curt reply. "The customer values their privacy. You'll be met at the delivery point." About an hour into the drive, I began to notice a peculiar smell. It was sweet and chemical, like cleaning products mixed with something organic. The odor was definitely emanating from the trailer, growing stronger near the large wooden crate. I saw moisture seeping from its base, forming a small puddle on the trailer floor. The delivery address was in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles north of Flint. The GPS guided me down progressively narrower roads until I reached a dirt driveway that disappeared into the woods. A quarter of a mile later, I found a clearing with a small house and several outbuildings. The house was dark, but I could make out a windowless van parked beside one of the sheds. 3 men emerged from behind the house, their voices low and hushed. They froze when they spotted me, and one of them approached. You the driver? Yeah, I have a delivery for this address. He glanced at his watch. You're early. Only by 10 minutes. Where do you want this crate? Instead of answering, he walked toward my trailer. The other two followed, and I saw they were wearing latex gloves at 2:30 in the morning. We'll handle the unloading, he said. You can leave. I need a signature for the delivery. No signatures. You were never here. Legitimate deliveries always require a signature, but it was clear these men wanted no official record of this transaction. One of them was now closely examining the wooden crate, taking pictures with his phone. He documented every angle as if he were inspecting for damage rather than simply recording its arrival. I think I'll just leave it on the trailer. No, we need it in the shed. Why? Because that's where it belongs. There was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a request. I was outnumbered in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. I backed up to the shed. They used a hidden forklift to move the crate inside within minutes, then closed the doors. Please doing business, he said, handing me an envelope of cash. And remember, you were never here. The smell lingered in my trailer for days, sweet and chemical with that organic undertone. I finally recognized formaldehyde, like from a veterinary clinic where I'd once delivered medical supplies. A few weeks later, I was having coffee with another driver who mentioned picking up a weird midnight job from the same industrial district. Small wooden crate, anonymous customer premium rates. Let me guess, I said, really heavy heading to a rural address. He stared at me. How did you know? Lucky guess. You deliver it. Strangest thing. When I got to the address, it was just an empty field. No buildings, nothing. So I brought it back to the warehouse, but the place was locked up tight. He leaned forward, so I opened it. Empty. Nothing but packing material and concrete blocks for weight. I thought about that conversation for a long time. If his crate was empty, what had been in mine? What kind of merchandise requires formaldehyde, latex gloves, and absolute secrecy? 6 months later, I saw a news story about a medical research facility shut down for conducting unauthorized experiments. The facility was in an industrial district outside Birmingham, and the photo showed a building that looked very familiar. According to the article, investigators found evidence of illegal clinical trials, unregistered medical procedures, and missing research subjects who had signed up for experimental treatments. The article mentioned the facility had operated for months using contractors who may not have known the full scope of the operation. I still drive freight, but I'm more careful about loads I accept. And sometimes late at night, I wonder what I delivered to that shed in the woods. Most of all, I think about people who might have signed up for experimental treatments, trusting they would receive proper medical care. And I wonder if some of them ever made it home, or if they ended up in containers in the back of trucks, being transported to places where no one would ask questions about what happened when the power went out.